Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the warnings from a senior fund manager that Liz Truss's energy plans are in a little bit of jeopardy if she doesn't pay more attention to the economy. And I think that means attention with real policies, not rhetoric. After all, Truss never stops talking about growing the economy, but her short time in the top job so far has resulted in a much weaker pound and the prospect of it weakening further. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when it comes to the value of the national currency, always winners and losers either way in theory, allowing those with their heads in the sand to try and point to the silver lining. So you point out that ever since we left the customs union single market, the value of the pound against the almighty dollar has been in steady decline. When Liz Truss was announced as the next Prime Minister, it took a heavy fall. It rallied a few days later and then fell again. Now the US dollar is the main international currency, so this matters. That being said, if it were the euro, if they were ever to overtake the dollar as the international currency of refuge, well, the pound's falling against that either. So the pound is worth less against the two main currencies from the point of view of our businesses. That's okay, the sand head stickers will say. It means our exports will be cheaper. Don't you keep complaining that our exports are suffering? Well, this should help them. And yes, you can always take that view, but there are a couple of massive problems in the here and now. The first is that Brexit means our production has tanked. The lack of available workers has meant we cannot produce as much, but we still consume as much. So the balance of trade for goods has shifted even further towards imports. So the net effect of a weaker pound is sort of universally bad. Also, as the article which I'm going to refer to and link in the description below points out, and I've mentioned this in the past before, our exports can't actually take full advantage of the weaker pound because of Brexit red tape. Like barriers to export used to essentially be about your goods being competitively priced. So if the pound was stronger, it's like, yeah, our exporters would struggle a bit more because, their stuff costs more for people using other currencies. But if it got weaker, well, maybe they'd be able to sell more. But now there are lots of other trade barriers blocking our trade that weren't there before, that have got nothing to do with the value of the pound. So they can't take full advantage. But second big problem in the here and now, and this is very here and now, Liz Truss has announced a huge package to deal with rising energy prices in order to protect corporate profits. Because she refuses to keep bills down and make those corporations pay from a share of their windfall profits, which would be the easiest thing to do, she's about to embark on a huge borrowing programme. This Friday, she's getting Parliament in to approve her emergency budget in order to implement this. She's doing it on Friday to prevent any scrutiny of her plans before MPs have to vote on it. So it will all go through without any serious debate. But that doesn't matter for now. Even with a debate, the Tories would have nodded it through, and there'll be plenty of scrutiny later. And she will suffer the political consequences when it happens. But for now, she needs to borrow a huge sum in order to fund her corporate profit protection scheme. How much is unclear because the government haven't provided any costings. I've seen figures of 100 billion, 150 billion, up to 200 billion pounds needed. And it's not just there to fund the energy bill. Well, it's not even a freeze. The bills are still going up. But also the tax cuts scheme. Again, tax cuts for the rich, not the poor, mind you. This is where the weakening pound is a problem for her. The currency is not just something we use as a currency. It's a commodity in itself. It's bought and sold. It's an investment. If the pound is losing value, that means that investors are less keen on the currency. But Truss is about to require investors to invest more in the pound, in the form of buying government bonds that she's going to have to release in order to pay for her energy plan. If they're not keen on them, her spending plans will not add up. An article in The Independent cited Nicola Horlick, who seems to be a major player in the city, as saying, never mind a recession next year. The current retail figures already look to her and her peers like a recession is already in place. She's basically saying this actually looks like we're already in a recession. And this is what has led to the devaluation in the pound. Something that, as former Labour political advisor Alastair Campbell pointed out, would have the media in a frenzy if Labour were in government under the same sorry circumstances. But no, it's the Tories who've been in power for over 12 years, so here's a 10th newspaper front page in a row about the Royals. Because the strength of a currency is tied to levels of investment, its value is essentially a matter of confidence on the part of investors. Horlick said investors could turn away from gilts, which are the government bonds, if there's a general lack of confidence in the UK economy. Now, to have confidence in the economy, you ideally see a government with a sound fiscal plan. What they're actually seeing is a new Prime Minister who is about to break the government's own fiscal rules in order to fund tax cuts. Because bear in mind that Truss could fund an energy price freeze, and a proper freeze, because this isn't a freeze, it's still going up. It's like wrong to call it a freeze in the short term. You can call it a freeze in the longer term, because the idea is it then won't go up any further for the next 2 years, but it's still going up in a couple of weeks. But she could fund it, and she could do it without raising the overall level of borrowing compared to national income. She's choosing not to. She's choosing to have her cake and eat it, and to hell with the bill, because that comes later, and I'll have buggered off by then. It'll be someone else's problem. So as Horlick says, and I pointed out a week or so ago, if investors don't buy these bonds, the government has to sweeten the deal, because they can't fund this plan without those bonds being sold. They cannot. So that means raising the interest rates. Basically, the government have to tempt investors with larger payoffs when the bonds mature. And those payoffs are paid for from tax revenues, of course. That's what we call servicing the debt. So when they pay out, it means the government of the time will need to either raise taxes or lower public spending to manage. Now, Truss, as I say, may not care about that because she will not expect to be in government when it happens. But it may also not be as straightforward as just selling our national future for her short-term gain. No matter the promised payout, investors still need confidence that it will pay out. I mean, what if we default? The UK is not in the habit of defaulting, it has to be said. It hasn't done so for 90 years. But, you know, you can't be sure. If you see a government that doesn't seem to be following a clear, sensible series of fiscal policies, how can you be sure? You know, if you see them break their own fiscal rules, how can you be sure? Because the 90 years ago was during the Great Depression. Well, what we're heading into may well be of a similar level to the Great Depression if the government do not manage it carefully. And I don't think investors are seeing a government that looks like it's going to handle it carefully. So surely confidence is rocked by the fact the government is refusing also to publish the costs of their spending plans. Like I keep saying, if you've got a really good plan, and it's a really good plan, why wouldn't you actually publish it? Let people look at it. If it's a good plan, even if there's little niggles about it, then people won't be able to find major holes in it. Truss's energy plan runs for 2 years. So why can't we see the working out, the expected costings for the next 2 years? Yes, we know things can change, but why don't we see the plan? So far, we've seen no costings at all, bear in mind. But it's believed the Treasury will only announce the costs for a few months at a time. They have to announce some costs in order for the government, for Parliament to vote on it this Friday. But they're only going to do it a bit at a time, apparently. Not even a full year. So that can only lead you to thinking they know what they're doing is not a good look, you know, for the general public. Because consider what they are doing. They're borrowing a huge amount of money, however much it ends up being, in order to fund tax cuts and what they call energy price freezes. But several things that ordinary voters won't be happy about. First, the cost of this doesn't just cover the actual increase in the cost of energy, but corporate profits as well. Labour had a plan, well, still have a plan, to compensate energy companies only for the increase in the wholesale cost of the energy. They'll still make their normal profits, they'll still do that, but not the extra windfall profits that they shouldn't be making anyway. Second, the cost of this is being added to our tax bill in the future because it's funded from borrowing. So much borrowing, in fact, that it breaks the government's own rules on borrowing. Again, Labour's plan is to not only spend less, because they're not using the money to fund corporate profits, but it's only to compensate for the increase in energy costs, not profits, but it's also largely funded from the windfall profits of oil and gas companies. So no nasty surprise in future taxes. Third, Labour's plan was also to insulate homes so that people didn't need to use as much energy next winter. That would keep costs down for the long term. Homes in the UK are generally very poorly insulated. The government's not doing that because they're on the side of the corporations. They want people to consume more energy. They want that because that helps the oil and gas companies and the energy companies make more profit. And fourth, some of this borrowing is to pay for tax cuts that only benefit those who are not struggling with the cost of living. Struggling households are not benefiting from a cut to national insurance, a freeze on corporation tax, or even the rumoured changes to income tax. It puts nothing of significance in their pockets. I think the political debate's going to be very interesting over the next couple of months. Truss is doing what Johnson did before her, the bare minimum to prevent major civil disobedience. But the severity of our economic situation and the cost of living for the public is such that it shouldn't be possible for the government to get away with such weak action and such blatant support of profiteering corporations. So it will be interesting to see if she gets away with it. I do hope not. I do sort of expect not as well, but we'll see. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.